You sit down to work. The task is open. You know exactly what needs to get done. And then your brain just leaves. No warning, no decision. It's just gone. 1 second you're answering an email. The next there are 11 tabs open. You're halfway through a video about a country you'll never ever visit. And somehow 20 minutes disappeared without you even noticing. You pick up your phone for 1 second and lose 40 minutes. You reread the same paragraph 3 times and retain absolutely nothing. Not because it's difficult, but because something keeps hijacking your attention before it can fully land. And you've heard what people say about you. They call you lazy, low discipline, lack of motivation. But that explanation falls apart the second that hyperfocus enters the picture. Because lazy people don't accidentally spend 6 straight hours locked into something without realizing time passed. So what's actually happening here? Why does your brain refuse to focus on things that matter, but suddenly lock in when something becomes interesting enough? The answer has a lot less to do with willpower than people think. And a lot more to do with how attention gets regulated, captured, and stolen. And who am I to explain why your focus keeps fracturing? My name is Dr. Sulman Aziz Mirza, triple board certified in adult psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, and addiction medicine. And I spend a lot of time helping people realize that they're dwelling in a world designed to divide their attention. The best way I can describe attentional drift is this. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands. You're not dropping it on purpose, you're not being careless, but it keeps slipping through the gaps anyway. And by the time you notice, most of it's already gone. That's what attention feels like for a lot of ADHD brains. Not absent, not broken, just slippery. It slides sideways mid-task towards whatever is louder, newer, faster, or more stimulating than the thing you were actually trying to focus on. And the strangest part is how automatic it feels. Someone sits down to answer one email, simple task, 5 minutes. While the inbox loads, they click one unrelated link. That link raises a question, so they search it. The search results are interesting, so they open a few more tabs, and then another, and another. And 20 minutes later, there are 11 tabs open. The original email has disappeared somewhere underneath all of them, and they genuinely can't reconstruct how they got there. Not because they consciously decided to abandon the task, because their attention kept responding to the strongest signal in the room. Then there's the phone problem. Notification lights up. They glance at it for what feels like 1 second, and 40 minutes disappear. This is the part that people misunderstand. ADHD attention doesn't just wander passively. It gets redirected aggressively. It's closer to what happens to a compass near a magnet. The compass isn't broken. It's responding exactly the way it was designed to respond, just to the wrong signal. And interruptions might be the worst part. Someone asks a quick question, 30 harmless seconds. But when the person tries to return to the task, the entire mental thread is gone. Not fuzzy, gone. Because the interruption didn't just pause the task, it wiped the working memory workspace that was holding the task together in the first place. So now they aren't resuming, they're rebuilding. And after enough of these moments, people stop trusting their own attention entirely. Eventually, the question stops being, what distracted me? It becomes, what's wrong with me? And that's the distinction most people miss. This isn't a concentration problem. It's an attentional regulation problem. And once you understand that distinction, a lot of shame starts making a lot less sense. Now here's the question that quietly destroys a lot of people with ADHD. If you can hyperfocus for 6 straight hours on something interesting, like a game, a project, or a random Wikipedia spiral at 2 a.m, why does answering one important email suddenly feel impossible? Why can you focus intensely on things that don't matter, but struggle to stay locked onto things that do? Most people answer that question with a character judgment. They tell themselves that they're lazy, that they're undisciplined, that they're self-sabotaging. But that explanation collapses almost immediately. Because lazy people don't accidentally disappear inside a task for 6 straight hours. Some ADHD researchers describe this as an interest-based nervous system rather than an importance-based one. And that distinction matters a lot. Neurotypical attention can often stay online because something is important. There is a deadline, a consequence, a reason it needs to happen. ADHD attention frequently doesn't respond strongly enough to importance alone. It responds to interest, novelty, urgency, challenge, emotional investment. When one of those signals becomes strong enough, attention can lock in with an intensity most people never experience. That's hyperfocus. Not fake motivation, not selective effort. A nervous system finally receiving enough stimulation to fully engage. Which means the problem usually isn't caring. The problem is that caring by self often isn't neurologically loud enough. And once you understand that, a lot of self-hatred starts looking wildly misplaced. Now, take that nervous system and drop it into the modern internet. Things get ugly fast, because modern technology is not competing fairly for your attention. It's engineered to interrupt it, fragment it, and recapture it as aggressively as possible. Short-form video is probably the clearest example. TikTok, Reels, Shorts, the entire format is built around rapid novelty cycling. Every few seconds, you're going to get a new stimulus, a new emotional hit, a new reward prediction. And unpredictable rewards hold attention far more effectively than predictable ones. Casinos figured that out a long time ago. Tech platforms just digitized it. For an interest-based nervous system constantly scanning for stimulation, that environment becomes extremely difficult to leave voluntarily. Notifications create a different kind of damage. They train your brain to anticipate interruption before interruption even happens. After enough alerts, banners, vibrations, and previews, people start checking their phones before anything even arrives. Not because information appeared, because anticipation itself became the habit. Then there's the tab problem. Multiple tabs, multiple half-started tasks. Browser windows stacked behind each other, pretending to be productivity. And it feels productive because your brain stays busy. But cognitively, it's closer to fragmentation than momentum. Every open tab becomes a small unresolved claim on your attention. And stack enough of them together, and the cognitive overhead alone starts draining the quality of your thinking. And this is the part most people miss. Your attention can be exhausted without ever being meaningfully directed. That's why people end the day mentally depleted while still feeling like nothing important actually happened. Their attention was active all day. It just didn't belong to them. So if your attention keeps getting pulled toward the strongest signal in the environment, what actually helps? Not hacks, not another productivity app, not a motivational speech you give yourself before opening the laptop. Actual attentional regulation, which usually means building environments where your focus has a realistic chance before the work session even starts. The first thing that helps is protecting the attentional environment before you need focus, not during, because attention is much easier to protect than it is to recover. So put your phone out of the room entirely. Not face down beside you, out of the room. Fewer tabs open, fewer competing signals visible, less cognitive noise constantly asking your brain to switch tracks. The goal isn't discipline, it's friction. You're not trying to outfight the magnets through willpower. You're removing some of the magnets before the fight even starts. The second thing that helps is something far more people with ADHD should be taught. Re-entry ramps. Because interruptions don't just interrupt attention, they interrupt continuity. Every time you leave a task, lunch break, meeting, phone call, somebody walking into your room, your working memory drops part of the mental structure holding that task together, which means returning to the task can feel less like resuming and more like rebuilding the engine from loose parts. So before you stop, leave yourself a breadcrumb. Not a full summary, just enough context to restart momentum later. I was connecting X to Y. This is the paragraph I'm stuck on. Next step is opening the spreadsheet. Future you no longer has to reconstruct the entire mental thread from scratch. The third thing that helps is controlled stimulation. And this surprises a lot of people because most productivity advice treats stimulation like the enemy. But have you ever noticed you sometimes focus better in a noisy coffee shop than in a completely silent library? Or that certain kinds of background noise somehow make it easier to stay mentally locked in? That's not random. For a lot of ADHD brains, completely empty environments don't feel calming. They feel understimulating. And when the nervous system doesn't get enough stimulation from the environment, it starts searching for something more engaging on its own. That's when attention drifts sideways, which means the goal usually isn't eliminating stimulation completely, it's choosing stimulation intentionally before your brain goes looking for it elsewhere. Instrumental music, cafe background noise, a standing desk that lets your body move while your mind stays engaged. Movement breaks built into the day before exhaustion forces them. Then there are external attentional anchors. Timers, body doubling, accountability check-ins, visual cues. And these tools work for an important reason. Tasks don't generate enough internal salience can temporarily borrow salience from external structure. A visible timer adds urgency. Another person nearby adds social attention. A checklist reduces working memory load. These aren't crutches, they're external supports for signals the brain isn't reliably generating on its own. And that's the larger shift underneath all this. Recovery usually starts when people stop treating attentional regulation like a moral failure and start treating it like an environment and nervous system problem instead. Because once you understand what your brain is actually responding to, you can finally stop building strategies around shame. Struggling to stay focused doesn't mean you don't care. It means your brain is trying to function inside an environment filled with signals specifically designed to outcompete your attention. And if your nervous system already struggles with attentional regulation, that competition was never fair to begin with. So before your next work session, try two things. Remove one attentional magnet and leave yourself one reentry note. That's it. Start there. Because the real danger of chronic attentional fragmentation isn't just lost productivity. It's what happens when someone spends years experiencing their own mind as unreliable. The missed deadlines, the unfinished projects, the constant drifting. After long enough, people stop seeing those as symptoms, and they start seeing them as personality traits. I'm lazy, I'm inconsistent, I never follow through. And that shift quietly reshapes identity. Not just how people work, but how they talk to themselves. What they expect from themselves. What they believe that they are capable of doing. That's why attentional regulation matters so much. This was never just about productivity. It was about whether your attention belongs to you long enough for your life to start feeling like it does too. And even when people do learn how to stabilize attention, another problem usually appears underneath it. Because functioning and sustaining are not the same thing. A lot of people learn how to push through. Far fewer learn how to do it without eventually burning themselves out. And that's where the next part of this conversation starts. Make sure that you're locked in via the playlist below for that one. And until next time, be safe and be well.